Hey everybody, welcome back to Game Esoterica, continuing series Ridge Evolution. It's a hard word to say, but it's an arcade racing retrospective on the Ridge Racer franchise. And if you can't tell already, today we are playing Rave Racer, the third arcade game released by Namco. But in all honesty, I really consider this to be Ridge Racer 2 because the actual Ridge Racer 2 more just a rehash of the original. But Rave Racer is more of what you know and love in the Ridge Racer franchise. It has a better graphical prowess to it, even though it is running on the same hardware. It just means the developers back then we're getting better at using Namco System 22 to get more out of it. It is just another Ridge Racer game, and you know I'm gonna love it. And the best part about Rave Racer is it actually includes new tracks compared to Ridge Racer and Ridge Racer 2, which love to recycle. Now it does do some weird things like that every once in a while, and again, like every Ridge Racer game, I can't recommend enough you go into the first person view. That is where everything is going to excel here. And I would say that the sensation of speed and overall physics of the game have slightly improved in my opinion. I love the camera sway that Rave Racer adds that is just a little bit more amplified from the original two games. But of course, if you're into Ridge Racer and you love that drifting, you're getting more of the same here. And getting extra new tracks is great, although this game still does retread a little bit of familiar territory, which I will get to in just a little bit. But again, just going through this game, even in 1995 when Sega had some of their Model 2 arcade racing games on arcade floors, it was a sight to behold. And you'll see here that again, Rave Racer is going to retread this very familiar territory from the original games. It's one of those things, by the time Rave Racer comes around, you've seen a lot of what Ridge Racer can do, and getting those new tracks made a huge additional bonus. But I do still wish that the developers at Namco would put a little bit more in and not use some of the original tracks from the original two games into this release. And interestingly enough, it was supposed to be ported over to the PlayStation, but they ended up getting Rage Racer instead, which feels like Ridge Racer except getting closer to the R4 formula and further away from the arcade releases. And it gets really hard to say all these titles, Ridge, Rave, and Race. If I make a mistake, don't hate me for it. But you will see here, again, it is just such intense racing action, but it's so impressive how much better the developers were at using the System 22, because this, while utilizing the same hardware, just looks and runs better. Of course, the original games were still fluid, but this one just has more dynamic camera work, and it looks like it has better textures as well in certain spots. But that's what happens when you work on hardware for a very long time. You get better at using it. It's like late-gen console games. They look so much better than the original launch day titles. But you'll see here as we move to the next track, we're finally getting new tracks in a Ridge Racing game, and that is what really matters on this one. I do love the new track design, even if sometimes turning in mid-air and being able to control definitely breaks the laws of physics the way we all know and love them. But it doesn't matter, it's an arcade racing game, and we're not here for realism, we're here for absolute heart-pounding racing, and Rave Racer is going to give that to you. And of course, it wouldn't be a game like Rave Racer without having a great soundtrack, but we'll get to that in just a moment. But I love how much windier some of these courses are here as they turn back around on themselves. It is a little more difficult to race in the third person view, but I wanted to give you guys a better sensation of what that felt like. I will be jumping back into first person here in just a minute, but that is something that I've had an issue with for the entirety of the Ridge Racer franchise. Unlike Sega arcade racing games where sometimes I will be in third person mode, I much prefer the cockpit view here. It just makes it me a better racer when I am playing, so let's jump right back into it. And I do love that you could technically fall down to a lower area in the game as well, and there's those cones there, so there is definitely a risk versus reward. When you're drifting well and everything is going correctly, this game is absolutely incredible. But when you make a mistake, it is punishing. But the great thing about a game like this is the mistakes are on you. Once you learn the vehicle, once you learn how it turns, how to drift, and how to deal with all of the different apex of the corners, if you don't succeed, it's because you either made a mistake, you came in too hot, or you just weren't paying attention to what the game was asking of you. And that is what's required out of a game like Rave Racer. They're paying attention and understanding exactly how the physics engine works so that when you get used to it, you know what to do. And I will say this game 100% comes alive using a racing wheel. I can't recommend one enough. That's how I captured this. With analog controls, it is still quite good, but you want to have that wheel, especially with some force feedback if you can get it. But now that we're getting close to the finish line here, what I'm going to do is jump over to the original Ridge Racer, because Rave Racer is using some of the same assets and tracks but improving them, and you can see as we go to the original game, it definitely does diminish ever so slightly in graphical quality. But the real reason I'm doing this is to give you a sound sample here of the original Ridge Racer soundtrack versus the Rave Racer iteration when it comes out with the same cores. Because by Rave Racer, the music got a little more technically in a good way, so go ahead and listen for like 45 seconds and I'll be back with more game to show you. Tell me down below which sound sample you like better. I would say for me it's Rave Racer by like 2%. But interestingly and sadly, this is going to be the last time we see a mainline Ridge Racer game released for arcades, because while everyone thinks of this as an arcade franchise, the large majority of games are either handheld or console releases. There will be one more arcade release, but it's technically an offshoot with Pocket Racer, but we'll have a video on that. And I love the intro here as well. This is when it got a little bit more flashy, and you see that carry over into something like R4 on the PlayStation 1. Rave Racer feels like the bridge game leading the original Ridge Racer and Ridge Racer 2 into the future, with Rage Racer being kind of in that same evolution. And I will have a video on Rage Racer as well, but you can see here they both came out right around the same time, but they do feel wildly different. Rave Race feels like the arcade classic with new tracks, and Rage Racer feels like a combination of the arcade games along with more of the R4 gameplay style. And I would say out of the entire franchise, Rage Race is one that still confuses me to this day, but you'll have to wait till we get to that video. But as we pop back over to Rave Race again, it is just such an intense game, and even if it does share tracks with the original release, I don't really care all that much because it is just another fun way to play the game, and Namco brought just enough new here that you're going to have a good time. So if I had to make a recommendation, even if I ran out of time right there, as far as what game to play, you will see here that it does have some overlap with the original game. I would play Ridge Racer 2 and Rave Racer and basically just play the original Ridge Racer arcade release as kind of a nostalgic thing to see where it came from. But even in first person, as we jump through that corner there into the air and basically drift in the middle of the sky, you can't help but deny the fun factor of this game. It is Namco's developers firing on all cylinders. The sensation of speed, the physics, the handling, the drifting, the course layout is some of the best stuff that they've ever done. But I would say I still think R4 is probably my favorite game in the franchise, even including the modern ones, and I'm deciding whether or not I'm going to do another episode on that. I did a one-off on it last year, so leave me a comment down below and tell me if you want to actually see a repeat of that Ridge Racer video with some new commentary as far as the overall franchise is concerned. I would be curious. But as we drift around the corner there and you see those cows in the pen, the amount of detail in the courses and the amount of flair that they put in a game that you're basically not even paying attention to what's going on because you're racing is huge. You can tell the developers absolutely love this franchise, and it does seem really weird that this is going to be the last arcade dedicated release the franchise ever got. I'm really surprised it has never come back to arcades, but even though today they're basically dead outside of Japan, so I'm really not that surprised. And you always have the Wangan series if you want to play Ridge Racer adjacent arcade racing fun, but I'll talk about that in a different video. But as we come around this last corner here and go under the bridge, if you've never played this game before, you 100% owe it to yourself to do so. This is definitely a rare arcade cabinet these days, so if I'm going to see a Ridge Racer cab, it's going to be one of the originals. Rave Race doesn't seem to have lived as long, but the great part is, as you can see here, it emulates perfectly in MAME and you can have a lot of fun, but I definitely recommend you grabbing a wheel and pedal set. It sells the illusion that much better. But Rave Racer is just another one of those special Namco games, and it's the last in the arcade lineage, so we'll be back next week with something a little bit more console based. We'll see you next time. Bye bye.
You did it! You did it! You won the